Hello everyone and welcome to the 2015 World Championship Group Draw Review with myself, Tsepha, also with Froskurinn here today. So without any further ado, we're just going to get right into it and start with Group A. For those of you who missed the group draw, of course, Group A is going to consist of the first seed from North America, Counterlogic Gaming, the second seed from the LMS, Flash Wolves, not Yoi Flash Wolves, Ku Tigers, who are the second seed from Korea, and Pain Gaming, who won out over Chaos Latin Gamers for the second international wildcard slot. So, for me, as an LMS caster, the first thing that jumps out to me are going to be the Flash Wolves, because the Flash Wolves, a little bit, of a less consistent team, but when they show up, I think they're better than CLG in a lot of realms, and that makes me think that they're going to be able to take one of these top slots, at least in Group A.
That's a really bold statement to make. I mean, obviously, there's much more exposure to the North American and the EU LCS in terms of just knowledge, information, accessibility to the players. You have to remember that back at MSI so long ago, back in spring, that AHQ actually performed very well. We never got to see an elongated series against Fnatic, or like a best-of-5 scenario, even a best-of-3, but AHQ did manage to beat Fnatic. Now, naturally, Fnatic has made some adjustments there, but again, Flash Wolves to CLG, I think most people will look at that and say, Ku Tigers CLG, like that's who's making it out of this group stage, but I do think that there is an argument to be made that you have to look at the LMS region. Like, you can't be disrespectful for the amount of progress, like the progression that they've made. I think that goes back to kind of the geographic location and their scrim partners. Like, we know that AHQ is scrimming teams like EDG. Because
we know both of them are scrimming EDG, actually.
So there you go. So just the amount of practice that the LMS region has had had as a whole, especially because they're separating from Southeast Asia, I think is really key to look at. But in terms of the actual individual matchup, so CLG versus Flash Wolves, because I think definitively we can say Ku Tigers number one.
Well, let's start there. That's a good point. So Ku Tigers, we'll give them this one. They're the Korean team. They have more experience. They've played more games. We've seen more consistent performances from them in the past. And I think in international terms, a stronger team overall. They're in a stronger region. We're going to give them the credit of being a stronger team.
The thing for CLG, though, is as I look at 5.16, so again, regional qualifiers for the LPL were played on patch 5.16. The big changes is that we have carry top laners. Zion Spartan, CLG's top laner, is a massive monster in that top lane versus Stake, who, for the LMS region, let's just say for this tournament, is possibly one of the weakest, if not the weakest top laner in terms of consistency.
And despite the fact that he did play pretty well to beat out HKE in the second tournament that would decide the second slot for the LMS, he has been inconsistent in the past. And you're right, he's not the strongest mechanical player. He's more of the shot caller kind of leadership role. And I don't even know if he's a shot caller, but I know he does do good things for in-game communication, and Flash Wolves have in the past preferred fielding him over their other top laner, MMD. So I think we will see Stake, and you're probably right that Stake is a huge weakness, and I'm curious how the Flash Wolves will deal with that.
So if we're going to break it down between positions, so top lane, I have to give that to CLG over Flash Wolves.
But then if we look at jungle, it's, you got it. Okay, so the jungler for Flash Wolves, for those of you who aren't familiar with the team, is Karsa. And Karsa is one of the best junglers in the region, potentially the best jungler in the region, depending on how you feel about Mountain or what you value. But Karsa is an insanely good early pressure jungler. His Nidalee is banned away from him every game. Strong, aggressive, consistent jungler, right? And on the opposite side, even when it was Smithy, I would have given the edge to Karsa, although it would have been a slight edge. But now that it's Huhi is, of course, an unknown element. We can't be sure.
That's the thing. So, analytically, if you're breaking this down, you just have to make the assumption that it's a sub coming in. Most of the time, people look at subs and saying this isn't as, what's the word? It's not the best form. Like, you think about EDG with the rotating roster versus SKT remaining consistent, and so that's why people gave the edge to SKT. They've had more time with their primary roster, they're building up synergy, they're getting that experience. So I think the fact, even if Huhi shows up on the stage and he's just an absolute god, you can't go into that thinking analytically.
Yeah, there's no reference.
Yeah, you have to say that this is a straight downgrade because you have to assume synergy. Yeah. So.
And I think that communication level will be really important for CLG, because one of the things that they have finally gotten together appears to be their team coordination and their map movement as a team. And, Smithy really looked on point in their set against TSM. His Gragas was amazing. And so now that CLG have finally found a decent, good jungler that can communicate with the team, we're pulling in someone new. It doesn't inspire confidence. But even if Smithy was playing, personally, I'm still giving the edge to Karsa. I value early pressure junglers a lot. And I think one of the easiest way for Flash Wolves to win any game is to snowball early.
Okay. I think the last position to talk about between Flash Wolves and CLG is going to be the AD carry position, because when...
Why do you have to burn my dreams?
When CLG are in a conversation, you have to talk about Doublelift, especially because he's probably performing at the height of his career, kind of back to his early days power, where Doublelift was known as kind of a wrecking force internationally as an AD carry, and I think it's exciting because when he returns to Worlds this time around, kind of gets to be that person again.
And, I mean, I can't... So Doublelift is obviously playing very well, and my bigger concern is not the strength of Doublelift, but the lack of strength in Flash Wolves bot lane. On the one hand, you have Sword Art, who is a god tier support.
But he's against Aframo, who's also a god tier
Yes,
support.
and so I easily think that those two can go toe to toe. I think it's really going to come down to who can make an impact outside of the bot lane, and who will be freed to do that. Because for those of you who don't know the Flash Wolves, Karsa and NL are going to be their AD carries. I'm not sure exactly who they're going to field if they have announced that yet, but Karsa is one of the new Korean imports, very strong mechanical player, very high up in the ladder, but has kind of fumbled in team communication, been a little consistent. NL, not as strong mechanically, but much more consistent in terms of communication. But either way, whoever they decide to field, neither one of those players has shown us
consistency or ceiling above Doublelift.
Yeah, exactly. If Doublelift is in bad form, one of these guys can take down Doublelift. But if Doublelift is in good form, neither of these guys really stand a chance, at least from what I've seen.
From that, like the breakdown there, I would say it's going to be Coup Tigers, and then CLG would be my gut reaction. But I do think that it's much closer than people who probably aren't familiar with the LMS region, because again, LMS, they're scrim partners right now. They've gotten much stronger as a region, especially with the separation between...
Definitely. Longer season, more games in their season 2, which I think has helped a lot. Teams have been adapting a lot. HQ's been growing. Hong Kong Esports was growing before the end of the season. Obviously, they failed to qualify. So I think that's fair. I think that assuming everyone plays their best, we give the edge to CLG. So Coup Tigers, CLG, Flash Wolves. And now this, of course, puts Pain Gaming at the bottom. And this isn't the spot. I mean, for a lot of people who are Brazil region fans, you know that Pain Gaming is without a doubt the strongest team coming out of that region, and the region is steadily growing in strength. However, I don't think it's quite transcended that label as international wildcard region yet. I think it's getting there. I think it's growing. I think the teams are getting stronger, and I think what Pain Gaming does have the chance to do is pull some pretty big upsets and affect the outcome for Flash Wolves, for CLG, potentially for Coup Tigers as well, because if they can take a game off anyone, whoever they take a game off, that will greatly affect the standings.
I'm not going to so much say Coup Tigers. Like, I think Coup Tigers, because they're a very versatile team and the type of compositions that they run, they're a very intelligent team, that they'll be pretty solid, a step or a tier above, at least in terms of what they, like the weapons and the threats that they have on their arsenal. As far as Flash Wolves versus CLG, I do think that you bring up a good point that Pain Gaming is like it's stereotypical to call them like a blue shell, but if CLG mess up or you think if maybe they have a schedule, like a tough day, like maybe they face Pain first and then Coup last, and maybe they just look past Pain.
Well, and that's the thing, is that Pain Gaming, out of all the international wildcard regions, you can't sleep on Pain Gaming, because the thing is that...
Here's a question. Would you consider Pain Gaming stronger than Kaboom last year?
Yeah, without a doubt.
Okay. Would you consider CLG stronger than Alliance last year? I would say yes.
See, I don't remember too many of the Alliance games last year, outside of that one, so I don't really want to rate rate the teams there, but I know that Orange was not... I don't even think Orange was the best team that Brazil had to offer last year. I think, because it was Pain... I believe it was Pain and Kaboom last year, too, and Pain just kind of shit the bed in playoffs, quite frankly. So, Kaboom obviously earned the spot. They obviously got that win. It was a great game from them, but I think Pain Gaming are stronger. Okay. Is CLG, are Flash Wolves stronger than Alliance? Flash Wolves might even be on par with where Alliance is.
I'm not even trying to say like that Pain's going to beat Flash Wolves or CLG, but to me, because coming from the LPL, if you're playing 3 sets that weekend and you drop a set to, like, say you're playing King, EDG, LGD, chances are that you're focusing on LGD, EDG, and you can drop a set to King because you just don't have the preparation time, or you're looking past them. And not that it's that crunch time in group stage, but I think people need to be open to the possibility that if CLG are facing, Coup Tigers a day and Pain a day,
and while it could be insulting to the pride of a lot of these like teams that are not as high skilled, that is the way you have to think about it. When you have a limited time to prep, you're going to prioritize the teams that that are better than you, the teams that have unique strategies that you can probably beat and come out on top of. That's where your focus is going to be. It's going to be focusing on EDG, LGD. It's not going to be focusing on the King. It's not going to be focusing on Pain Gaming. in this case. So I think Pain have a huge potential to make a good impact and have a good showing for Brazil, because Brazil has been steadily improving. They are clearly rising very quickly, but I don't think they're there yet.
The goal for international wildcard teams is not to win Worlds, I don't think any of those teams, I mean, likewise, that's going to be the long-term goal, like one day we'll win Worlds, because that's every region's long-term goal, but I don't think Pain and Bangkok Titans go to Worlds to say we're going to be the world champions. I think they say we're going to learn something, we're going to do our region pride, and we're going to play the best form of League of Legends, take it back, and be stronger for our region as a whole. So, just different goals.
Different goals overall. So once again, to close out Group A, our final rating for how the teams stack up, it's going to be Coup Tigers in that first seed, CLG in that second seed, although it could change, Flash Wolves in that third seed, and Pain Gaming, of course, as the fourth spot. I keep saying seed, but the fourth spot for this group. So now we're going to be breaking down Group B, and so once again, for those of you who have not seen the group draw yet, you can see it on the side of your screen. It's going to be the first seed from EU, Fnatic, Invictus Gaming, the third seed from China, the first seed from the LMS, AHQ Esports Club, and of course the third seed, the Gauntlet Champions, Cloud9 from North America. So who do you think is going to come out on top? Because I think I know what you're going to say, but I don't know if everyone would agree with you. So who's going to come out on top?
I mean, obviously, the assumption for me is Invictus Gaming, Fnatic.
Okay.
Would be my two. Do I think it's definitively that way? To me, it's really hard. So we just have to do this quickly, because obviously we don't want to take too long on these videos. So let's just quickly break down the Fnatic Invictus Gaming, lane by lane matchup.
Yeah, okay. So start with the top lane. Break down Zatai versus Goonie for me.
I was actually going to do it bot to top.
Okay, fine. Do what you want to do.
Okay,
so give me bot to top.
Bot to top. Bottom lane for Invictus Gaming is going to be Kid and Kitties. Definitively the weakest part of that team. Particularly in Kid, although Kid is... He's always just kind of been... So the idea is you put Kid on a hyperscaling champion. He's more known for his Trinity Force users, like his Ezreal, his Kog'Maw, things like that. But he's had most success technically on Vayne. So put him on something that's going to wait. It's going to be calm, sits back. Kitties, you're going to put him on playmaking...
supports?
5v5 supports. So Braum, Alistar, they're not laning supports. I mean, obviously if your jungler's there, they're going to be fantastic. But again, they're skirmish 5v5 supports. Yeah. So they sit back in the lane and they just kind of let you do your thing. They don't feed. They're not going to die, but they're not going to put any pressure on you. Which against someone like Yellowstar and Reckless, especially in Reckless's most current form and kind of his new identity of being like an aggressive playmaker, is scary. And hands down, I have to give Fnatic to the stronger bot lane. Kid and Kitties, they're not a pushover, but they're not, I don't think they're going to apply any meaningful pressure on Yellowstar and Reckless, which is scary for me because I feel like Fnatic, like the hinge on which they swing is unlocking Yellowstar to roam around with Reignover and get things going on the map. So moving up from that, we move into the mid lane, Febiven versus Rookie. Now, obviously, you have a much larger resume and sample size from Rookie just because he's been around longer. He's competed in more international tournaments, not international tournaments, but more international scenes, being from OGN and now in the LPL, so you kind of have a larger spectrum.
Yeah, more international experience, and just more experience overall, which is something that I think a lot of people don't give enough respect to.
To me, I would say Rookie is going to come out on top there, but Febiven is a wild card for me. I mean, obviously, he's already proven that as a rookie, he's incredibly proficient and strong, especially at his MSI performance against the likes of Faker.
And that's something that we can't really underestimate. The fact that he picked an assassin against Faker, and it's admittedly a winning lane matchup, but when we talk to any pro in Season 3, they're just like, it doesn't matter what lane matchup you get, you play scared when you play against Faker. At least from NA and EU pros. So to have an EU player come in and pick something confidently and then have the confidence to engage, to get aggressive, to tower dive Faker, that's a pretty big showing. So while he may not be scared of Rookie, or he's definitely not going to be scared of Rookie, he's proven that. He's going to be confident coming into lane. I do still agree with you. Rookie has shown more, he's played more champions, he's been in the league longer, and he feels like a more consistent threat.
So I'm going to give the slight edge to Rookie there, but again, like, I'm not going to count Febiven out. So let's just say for, like, it's a wash there. So if bot lane definitively goes to Fnatic, and I think that there's an edge for mid lane in the mid lane to Invictus Gaming, because Rookie versus Febiven, but it's still somewhat close. Where this completely tips the scale is when you include the 2v2 of mid jungle versus Invictus Gaming from Fnatic. So that's Cacao, Rookie versus Reignover and Febiven. And I'm sorry, but if that's your spectrum there, if there's going to be skirmishes around the junglers ganking mid lane, that hands down goes to Invictus Gaming. You're facing against the KT Arrows. I will go on record saying that I think Cacao and Rookie have the best duo synergy in the world. Like, it's like right up there with Faker. I always want to say Benji. My producer's name is Benji. Benji. So if I ever do that...
So my question for you is that looking at this mid lane, and no, I don't think anyone's going to dispute that Cacao is the better jungler. And I think from that you can argue 100% that they have the better 2v2, regardless of how Febiven performs.
The argument that you can make is that Reignover won't 2v2 with Febiven, which he has shown in the past, but again, I think it's much more critical to Fnatic that it's kind of Yellowstar Reignover impacting a map in a certain area.
Well, and that's the thing I want to bring up, is that if Yellowstar is allowed to roam, if Kid and Kitties are playing that defensive style that you talk about, do you think that we could see a 3v2 in the mid lane? Do you think that Invictus Gaming will be able to respond?
I think best case scenario for Fnatic, if they do like a 3v3,
if they run in their support in their jungle into the mid lane.
Yeah, it's Yellowstar Reignover Febiven in the mid lane. For Invictus Gaming, it'll be Rookie, Cacao, and not Kitties, but Zatai.
Okay.
So, because Cacao plays mostly between his bottom and his top lane, and again, Kid and Kitties, they're pretty stationary. Kitties will roam occasionally, but he's not a super proactive support. So you have to think, if skirmishing is happening on the map for Invictus Gaming, 9 times out of 10, it's going to include Zatai, Cacao, and Rookie. And simply, like, Yellowstar versus Zatai, not player versus player, but impact of champion versus impact of champion. Like, if your top laner's down there, that's already terrifying versus, like, the support being there. Like, Brom's like, hey, I'm super strong, but hi, I'm Fiora.
Okay, and so I guess the next question is, if Zatai is roaming down, what is Huni doing, and how is Zatai so free to roam? Let's talk about this top lane matchup.
Okay, so this is where I think that it's the most interesting. And Huni, don't get me wrong, is a great top laner. I think he proved at MSI that on the international stage that he is a threat against the likes of Zatai, though. Now, Zatai is technically a role swap. He started as a mid laner. He's now transitioned into a top laner. And for a long time, Invictus Gaming, they didn't struggle. They've never been on the bottom of the standings, but they've been sitting pretty consistently in that 4th, 3rd seat. Mm-hmm. They plateaued. And a big issue is the fact that Zatai was really finding his playstyle, finding his place, how he worked with the team. Since the LPL playoffs and the regional qualifiers, where Invictus Gaming are playing the best League of Legends that they've ever played as a team, and this is the best form that they've looked in, a lot of that has to do not only with Rookie and Cacao kind of stepping up and being that Rookie and Cacao that we know that they can be, but Zatai finding his identity and defining his career as a top laner. So what is Zatai's career? He can play anything. I don't, like, that's not hyperbole. He can play anything. His career as a mid laner showed that. Mm-hmm. He was really well known as almost like pressing the random button. It was almost a gimmick that he would pick really obscure champions that were maybe brand new to the meta or hadn't been experimented with, mm-hmm. and he would use it to put you on the back foot and then get the advantage there. And he always plays to kill you. Now he's identified himself as more of like a carry-oriented top laner, so think like Zion Spartan-esque. Things like Fiora coming into the meta. So the 5.16 patch was incredibly proficient for Zatai. And whereas top laners like Huni and Marin will play to win the lane, like Acorn will play to win the lane. And what I mean is they'll deny you EXP, they'll deny you CS, they'll try to bounce the wave.
They'll win in terms of raw stats, but not necessarily with like aggression, trying to kill you, things like that.
Yeah, it's like I'm here to put the other top laner down, I'm not here to kill him. Zatai's only there to murder you. He's going to push in, he's going to be aggressive. And 9 times out of 10 when First Blood happens, it will be in Cacao's hands, but it'll be in the top lane. Like, when Invictus Gaming strike first, because Rookie is very good at also denying, and Rookie is, I think he's a bit more consistent in not playing passively, but more about denial versus murder. So Rookie will zone you off the creep wave, he'll make you fight for the experience, he'll make you fight for the gold. Zatai will try to do that, but through the means of killing you repeatedly.
Okay, so from what I'm seeing right now, the way that Invictus beat Fnatic here is that Rookie gets ahead of the creeps in lane, which forces jungle pressure mid. And then if jungle pressure is mid, it seems like it frees up Zatai and Cacao both
to be aggressive.
To be aggressive in the top lane.
Invictus Gaming will push forward. They will always shove into their lanes because Rookie wants the early bounce so he can freeze the wave in front of his tower and do his deny game where he stands on the back of the caster creeps and he dares you. Every time you come up to a creep, he's going to punish you. And it's scary because you think that Cacao could be there, and if Cacao and Rookie are there, that's one of the strongest 2v2s in the world. And by pushing forward, they do it simultaneously with Zatai. So if Reignover and Yellowstar are drawn by Rookie and Cacao in the mid lane, then that opens up Zatai where he can go toe-to-toe with Huni. And Huni's a great top laner, but Zatai is also an incredible player. He's also a legacy player. So again, if we're waiting, Rookie's resume versus Febiven's resume, yes, you've seen a lot of potential from Huni and Febiven, but Zatai has been playing for like 4 years, and he's been considered a veteran of the LPL scene. He has an incredible mechanical ceiling, like one of the highest in the world. His Riven mechanically is flawless. If you haven't seen his Riven games, he does things without Tiamat that should not be possible on Riven.
Oh yeah, you explained this to me. So for those of you who've played Riven Renekton, there's a lot of champions in the game League of Legends that can animation cancel certain abilities using the Tiamat active, essentially. And for some of those champions, such as Riven, it turns out you don't actually need the Tiamat to cancel some of those animations.
It just makes it easier.
Other abilities can cancel those animations too, but for those of you who are fighting game players, it's a very small frame window. I think you said like 3 frames. I'm not 100% sure if that's confirmed, but it's a very, very small window to cancel those animations. Tiamat makes that window much larger. It extends it by just essentially manually canceling the automation. But from what you told me, this guy does it
without Tiamat.
Without Tiamat.
In short terms, like the Too Long Didn't Read, his mechanics are god tier. He's one of the best faker players in terms of mechanics in the world. Like you're talking faker level. He doesn't have fakers.
One of the best Riven players in the world, not one of the best faker players.
Faker players. Yeah. Well, because I always do that, like when I confuse like Rumble and Acorn.
Yeah.
Like I'll say like, oh, they locked in Acorn. It's like a Rumble.
Yeah.
It just makes sense. No. He doesn't have the greatest decision making, but his mechanics I don't think anyone could dispute that Zatai is an incredible mechanical player. So that, for me, I actually give that to Zatai, which I think sounds blasphemy to a lot of people, but this guy, especially in his recent form, this is the best that Zatai has ever played, and he won a lot of Invictus Gaming's games.
And the other thing that I think we've seen from Zatai, and the reason that I'm willing to give it to him, despite actually really loving Huni as a player and really loving what he offers to Fnatic, is that he's played on 5.16. China has been prepping and scrimming for 5.16 more recently, and he has already proven that he knows what to do, and that in this carry top lane meta, he's shown up in that, and that's something we haven't seen from Fnatic yet. So we have more information from Invictus, and the information we have right now, at least, is telling me that they're the better team. So I agree. I'm willing to give Invictus that first slot.
Yep, I think it'll be IG Fnatic. Though what's curious to me, and what I think almost has a little bit more debate, is again the LMS region, the fact that a lot of people don't really look at it. You go back to MSI, again, adjustments have been made. The teams aren't as static, but this is the last time that we saw these two teams face. AHQ got the upset on Fnatic. We never got to see them in an elongated series where it was, best of 5 scenario to see what would happen when it all broke down. I definitely think it's important to illustrate that it was considered an upset, especially for how dominant Fnatic have been, not since MSI, or not just before MSI, but also since MSI. The upgrade of Reckless to Steelback, or from Steelback to Reckless. But I think you can't just overlook AHQ. I don't think when you look at Group B, obviously everyone's like Invictus Gaming, Fnatic, that's the easiest one. But I think you also have to be very respectful to AHQ. Again, we know that they're scrimming high-tier Chinese teams.
Well, and when we talk about post-MSI success, we have to remember that I believe HQ had an 11-3-0 season, which means, of course, that out of the 14 set of 2 games that they played, they 2-0'd in 11 of them, and they won 1 split in 3 of them. So they only dropped 3 games in the regular season. So in terms of regional dominance, that's pretty huge. The difference, however, the reason I'm willing to give Fnatic the edge in recent performance is because Origin, H2K, I think there's a lot more.
There's more across the region.
Yeah, in EU, and there's a lot of weak teams in EU too. But when you look at the LMS, it's pretty much, Flash Wolves, AHQ, Hong Kong Esports, up until they made some mistakes in the playoffs, and after they lost race, and it kind of went downhill. But those 3 teams are the strong teams, and everyone else is a tier below them essentially. Whereas EU, yes, you have Origin, H2K, and Fnatic, which are the strong teams. And most of the teams are below them, but not by nearly as wide of a margin as it is in the LMS.
Yeah, I can agree with that. So I think it's safe to say Fnatic, Invictus Gaming, AHQ, and now we have to kind of touch on Cloud9. So Cloud9 are the Miracle team. Their run, obviously high, moving over into the jungle position. Like, here's the problem with Cloud9 for me. Even if miracles do happen, even if they continue to rise up, and obviously it's capable. Like, I honestly have no idea what to expect from Cloud9's ceiling, because it just, it's brand new in terms of like its sample size for the actual current iteration of the roster that we have.
True, yeah.
So I can't, as an analyst, like, there's nothing really for me to go on and say like, this is the height of Cloud9. Like, this is what we can expect if they're playing their best, and this is what we can expect if they're playing in their consistency, just because there's not a large enough sample size. Problems that I see. This is probably the hardest jungle group.
Which is huge, because
Yes.
we've got Hai, who's his raw swap, and he's a great shot caller, and he's shown that leadership role, but he doesn't understand the jungle like these other guys do. He's not a career jungler.
Yeah.
And while in his best form, he may compare to Mountain, maybe even to Reignover. Cacao is the god of jungle.
But, like, the fact that it's not only Cacao, but it's also Reignover. Because you look at Worlds as a whole, and I think it is a true statement to say, like, these are some of the weakest jungle matchups that we've ever had in terms of history of the World Championship.
Yeah.
But in this group particularly, the fact that it's Reignover, Cacao, and Mountain, I don't think any of them are poor junglers. I mean, is there anyone that you're necessarily missing? You got TBQ.
Who's a weaker jungler.
Yeah, that's a...
Yeah, I think this is definitely the strongest group in terms of
like
jungle
the fact
strength.
that Reignover and Cacao are in here. Mountain is a fairly strong
Mountain
jungler.
is a very strong jungler, and I would say a much stronger jungler than High, just from initial impressions.
So there's that, and then you also have to consider Balls. Now, Balls has been getting better in the back half, but obviously there was a point where it's a slump, and if you thought the jungle matchup was terrifying, we just talked about how Huni is in this group, how Zatai is in this group, and how Ziv is in this group. So the top laner for AHQ is really good.
And that's something that we didn't touch on so much when we talked about AHQ, but once again, Ziv is a god tier top laner. Absolutely a world class top laner.
It sounds weird to say that because people are like, how can you use that vocabulary? Like, let me just explain Ziv. How he plays Maokai. Like, and Maokai's not technically considered a very hard mechanical champion to play, but he does this thing. When people are good Maokai players, it typically tells you that they're good at reading team fights, flanking teleport plays, making sure that they have appropriate backline threats. So typically when you're a good Maokai player, you're a smart player. You understand how to peel for your team and create zones that way. But Ziv is also mechanically very proficient at Maokai with his Twisted Advance in particular. I think I've seen him do this on like 7 different occasions. There's a small window where someone flashes, and if you time the Twisted Advance correctly, you will follow the flash, meaning that you don't have to burn your own flash or then get back into distance to hit them with a Twisted Advance. And he is so good at finding that correct window. You have to think he understands when they're going to flash, like predicting when the most predictable moment that the enemy top laner
has to flash.
Or
absolutely
not the enemy top laner, but yeah, has to flash.
The enemy, whoever it ends up being.
And then having the reaction time and the mechanical ceiling that he's able to consistently pull that one off. So
well, and additionally too, I mean, we talk about not only the intelligence to play Maokai to flank well, to protect the team well, and the mechanical skill of the flash, but this, admittedly, when he got his hands on Ryze the first time, Ryze was very powerful champion. And he showed us that he can carry with Ryze, which wasn't too impressive. But he was so good at Ryze that has been pretty much perma-banned away from him in every single game. Because you cannot... Ziv, yes, will play a tank and will initiate and be that brilliant team fighter that his team needs to be. But if you give him a top lane carry, at least from what he's shown us, he will carry a game. And while that pressure isn't always on him, AHQ do have that kind of in their back pocket.
So... Too long, didn't read of that. Cloud9, I think this safely goes Invictus Gaming, Fnatic, AHQ, but I think that you have to pay special attention to AHQ and how it's going to participate against Fnatic. Just because, again, the last international results that we had, we didn't get a large enough sample size, but
true.
It was closer than people expected it to be. Again, an upset that AHQ were able to beat Fnatic. Cloud9, I think safely you can put them in 4th spot, at least projection, just because the strength of the jungle pool in this group and the strength of the top laners. Not that Balls is a weak top laner. Again, he's been ramping up, but you have...
Comparatively to these other top laners, yes.
I mean, I think the only person he really dodged is Acorn.
Yeah.
Yeah, Marn and Acorn.
Yeah, and I mean,
Koro.
even if we look at the other NA top lane competition, is he better than Dyrus? Probably, maybe. I think that's a pretty even matchup. Is he even better than Zion Spartan in his own region? No. And
No.
I think Zion Spartan would
than
struggle
Solaz.
against Huni. I think Zion Spartan would probably lose to Zatai. I think Zion Spartan would struggle or lose to Ziv. So when I look at a much stronger carry-oriented top laner who would still lose to these guys, for me, I don't think Ball stands a chance in the top lane. Can he show up? Can he go even in lane? Yes, it's possible. He could even turn it around and win some of these lanes, but
I don't think it's winning the lanes. I think when you look at Cloud9 and their success, it's how they win their team fights.
Yeah.
Because, again, if you think about Balls as a Rumble player, which is one of his like signature picks, it's impacting the team fight phase. And I just don't think that there's a lot of options across the board in terms of roster where Cloud9 are going to win individually in the 1v1 matchups. I mean, Sneaky's a good 80 carry. Incarnation obviously has a high mechanical ceiling, but again, you're having issues trying to organize Cloud9. High has shored up a lot of those weaknesses with his shot calling, but again, you just don't have a big enough sample size for the current iteration of the roster. So
that's fair.
Fnatic, IG, Fnatic, AHQ, Cloud9.
And I'm willing to say that AHQ could take out Fnatic in this roster, but I will say that looking from what we've seen Fnatic recently, the second seed has to go to them. I love LMS. I have to put that in there as a disclaimer.
I think it's Fnatic.
right, so coming up is Group C. I think it's probably one of our favorite groups to watch, just because it has the rematch from MSI. So starting at the top, the first seed from Korea is going to be SKT1. Of course, the second seed from Europe, H2K. The second seed from China, Edward Gaming, EDG, and of course the winner of the wildcard tournament in Turkey, the Bangkok Titans.
I thought H2K were the third seed from Europe.
H2K are the second seed. Origin are the third seed. They made it through the bracket.
Okay. Let's jump right into this. We're going to talk about SKT versus EDG.
That's pretty much the rest of the bracket. We'll get there. Just go. Just do your thing. I know you want to talk about this.
Okay. So I get a lot of comments, or I've seen a lot of It breaks down to this. People will still place SKT over EDG, I cite MSI. Like the last time these two teams faced, EDG won, but people are like, Faker didn't play 5 games. Let me just assist, because I think that reasoning is flawed, but I don't think that the outcome is flawed. So, how does this work? EDG beat the EasyHoon version of SKT, EDG beat the Faker version of SKT, and EDG outdrafted Coma. So the 3 elements of SKT, EDG beat in that best of 5. Do I think it was a mistake that EasyHoon was played? Not necessarily. I think it was a mistake that EasyHoon was played for as long as he was. You have to think, Pawn has the better record against Faker. So as a coach for SKT, the fact that you have a very gifted mid laner in EasyHoon, and if you watch the lane phase between EasyHoon and Pawn, I actually say EasyHoon outplayed Pawn and was doing better in the lane against him, and Pawn was struggling a bit. So analytically, you have these 2 mid laners. One of them has a losing matchup against Pawn. One of them seems to be beating him in lane, or at least holding his own, and kind of creates this different dynamic to the team. So it makes sense to me that Coma would say EasyHoon. I think the mistake was playing EasyHoon back-to-back when he lost. I think Faker should have been rotated in 1 game earlier. So I think if you're going to point at it, that's probably like the biggest glaring issue for me. But again, EDG, like, they proved, because if Faker had played all 5 games, then people could have gone and stepped forward and say, well, Pawn has the better record against Faker. You have EasyHoon. EasyHoon has shown himself. Like, why wouldn't you try that? So to me, it makes sense logically that Coma would attempt that. I don't think anyone can say, like, that's completely out of the realm of possibility.
Okay.
But again, EDG beat what I like to call every single version of SKT. But here is how SKT actually wins. So, like, people be like, oh, you're biased, whatever. No. SKT have been more dominant. I'm not going to say more dominate.
So this is if you want to make an argument for SKT. If you want to make an argument for being SKT better than EDG, this is how you would do it. This is the actual argument that you should be making. SKT incredibly dominant in their region. Yep.
They didn't play with a rotating roster, so you have to assume that you have all 5 members. That the synergy has just been increasing since then. EDG, of course, rotating the roster between their mid and top position with Amazing J and Bamey over Pawn and Koro due to injuries and things like that. So you've been building up in the synergy. In the most recent form of SKT and EDG, SKT have looked far more dominant. You think about their crushing victory over KT, like just devastatingly so. EDG didn't look that dominant. I mean, they looked dominant in the regional qualifiers in their first set against Snake, but it still wasn't to the same magnitude. So I think the most recent kind of dominance that SKT have shown, and the most important thing for me, is the patch. The fact that Worlds will be on the 5.18 patch. SKT have shown that they are a much better team at transitioning into patches than EDG. Like, EDG's primary weakness is that they're slow to shift to patches. It's actually a very notorious problem for them. So if you're going to make an argument why SKT is better than EDG, I'm tired of the Faker MSI argument. It's done. They won. They beat all forms of SKT. SKT will still be the number 1 seed out of this group because of the reasons that I listed. The patch changes, the most recent form of dominance, and the fact that they haven't been rotating their rosters. That's your argument. There you go.
Well, hold on. Okay, so my issue with that argument, well, I don't have an issue with that argument. That's fair. Everything that you said is valid. There's evidence to support everything you said. My concern for SKT is Wolf in the bot lane compared to Mako for EDG.
No, I do agree with that. I think that SKT actually have a weaker 5v5 than EDG, just primarily because of Wolf. And it's not necessarily just the Wolf versus Mako matchup. It's the fact that support is so important in the 5v5. You think, like, again, support champions are being picked for their skirmish and their 5v5 potential because there's so much roaming going on versus the lane dominance. Like, if you want a truly lane dominant support, you're looking at someone like Thresh. And Thresh is still a high priority pick because of his kit and what he offers, but we've seen Braum. Braum is like pretty much number 1. The Unbreakable, what is that that's why, and that's not used in your lane phase. I mean, you can use it in the lane phase, and it's incredibly proficient because it denies so much damage, but it's mostly there to be a counteract for sieging.
Yeah.
To stall that out. So the responsibility that supports are given on the current champion pool, Wolf versus Mako is the better player. And a lot of SKT, like if you go back to the last time these two teams faced at MSI, if you look at that, I think people can point at Wolf and say that was the most glaring issue. So a 3v3 skirmish for SKT, if Faker is involved, I think they win. It's still very scary depending on who EDG's there because they are also a very good skirmishing team. But just Faker, he counts as like 3 players. Yeah. And he's able to just like swing those things. So if it's like Faker, Marn, Bengi,
yeah,
I think that 3v3, that's SKT. If it's a 5v5 and Wolf needs to show up on that very critical playmaking support champion,
if it comes down to like a single unbreakable or perfectly positioned ult or a great flash,
an amazing pulverize or something like that, I would give that to EDG across all 5 members.
Okay, so it's not SKT. You're giving the benefit of the doubt due to recent performances to SKT.
Yeah, I still think it's SKT EDG, but if like the win conditions, like if SKT lose, this is what I think why they would lose.
Okay. So that's fair.
So that's where I stand. I'm sorry if that came off a little bit like intense, but I'm tired of the Twitter fights, tired of the conversation. Like SKT, you can argue very much that they're going to be the first seed and they're going to beat EDG, but it has nothing to do with MSI.
Okay, so the other reason that I really love this group is not just the MSI roundup or the MSI rematch. And it's not the Bangkok Titans either, despite the fact that they're a very interesting team. It's actually the mid lane matchup between H2K
the Zed matchup
and SKT. So this is going to be Ryu versus Faker, and I mean this is a matchup with so much history and you think about this, and this is something that you've talked about on China Talk. I've talked about on Into the Rift. We've probably both talked about it on a cast at some point. But this was the defining moment in both their careers. This is the moment where Faker became a god, where Faker's like, that clip is in like every news report for every like major news outlet that's trying to explain League of Legends to people.
ESPN.
Yeah. And for Ryu, that's the moment where like everybody was like, Ryu sucks. And Ryu doesn't suck. Ryu's a very good mid laner. He's proven it in EU and he's been stepping it up. But this is like the rematch. This is the grudge match. This is
the narrative. I think that this is probably the best narrative, which is because it's only like one player. Like obviously, if Cloud9, if CLG wins Worlds, that's an incredible narrative. But the Ryu versus Faker matchup to me is almost better just because of like the history and I don't want to say the memes, but you know, like how the community handles it because it's so active. Like the fact that they came out and they said, if we get a group with Faker and we get first pick, we're insta-locking Zed. Like no matter what.
Well, I just expect, and I just fully expect that if at any point Ryu gets a solo kill on Faker, there will be hundreds of montages of like Ryu's like glum face having a slight the slight grin that he is sure to get when he solo kills Faker, and then like that horrible John Cena music in the background as he takes down Faker.
What is No, it would just be so good. Ryu, this is your chance. You can pull the Feb event, you can lock in the assassin, you can face across from the god, and you can take back your throne. Pull it out of his bleeding hands. And even if you lose the game, even if you don't come out of group stage, you have a goal, sir. And I wish you well. Yeah,
and this is honestly a really rough group for H2K. They kind of got screwed by this draw. And
smart. H2K, though, are a very smart team, especially in their map movements and how they prioritize and identify objectives. And again, EDG are very slow to... I still think definitively it's SKT and EDG. But again, if I had to underline... If it's H2K over EDG, because I think that's much more plausible.
Faster adaptation, better map movement in the patch?
Yeah, like underlining, like, if this happens, I think this will be how it happens. EDG are awful in their side wave management. They're actually really bad in their minion manipulation.
Okay.
And I think this was proven in the EDG versus LGD set, especially, and why LGD came out so definitively on top. So I think that's a weakness that H2K is a team just of how they're set up stylistically that they actually could exploit. So if H2K win, I still think it's like 80-20 to EDG winning. Yeah. I think that would be the reason why. Also the patch, if EDG fumble the patch.
Okay, so we're pretty certain that it's going to be SKT EDG, and obviously that might shift. But SKT EDG H2K is our initial impressions, and once again we put the third seed or the team from Pool 3 on the bottom again. So I haven't actually gotten to watch Bangkok Titans, but I know you got to cast their qualifiers. Yep. So we've underlaid the win conditions for every other team despite overwhelming odds. What needs to happen for Bangkok Titans to get even just a single game in this tournament?
Okay, so here's how the Bangkok Titans work. During the group stage at the International Wildcard, they actually didn't look that impressive. They looked strong mechanically, but like their decision making was very flawed, and it was still relatively close in terms of them between other teams. When they got to the finals, it was almost like they leveled up like Frieza. You finally saw their final form, and they just smashed the Chiefs. Yes, the Chiefs kind of handily gave them a couple of those games where the Chiefs were very clearly ahead and then they made a mistake. But this is the thing. The longer a team fight goes on for the Bangkok Titans, the higher their chance of winning. And they'll fight for like 45 seconds where double teleports come in. People have died, have gotten back to the fight. But because their mechanical ceiling is still relatively respectable, they just somehow will outplay people. And I know people want to go to the chaos style type of thing, which I think you can actually apply. But it's more like this. So say you're trying to give a cat a bath.
This cat's name is Bangkok Titans.
The cat's name is Bangkok Titans. Now, if you've ever given a cat a bath, cats don't like water, and it tends to hurt a lot. But the thing is you're still technically winning. Like, you are EDG, H2K, and SKT.
And you're giving the cat a bath.
Yeah, the cat's getting clean, so again, you're technically winning, but it hurts, and it scratches. And if you lose control of it, it can fuck your shit up. So, cat's clean, you maybe have some claw marks, hopefully you don't lose a face, and I think that's how that's gonna go down.
Okay. But if they're too ambitious with their Bangkok Titans cat bath, then they will like lose enough blood to pass out on the floor and the cat will walk away victorious.
You gotta keep it away from the face, okay? Just as long, the hands, that's fine, maybe you lose a couple kills in the side lanes because things get a little bit wonky, but just keep it away from the face, get the cat clean, after it's clean, just let it run out of the room.
Things look grim for the Bangkok Titans.
It's a tough group. The fact that they got SKT and EDG just because of how the circuit points worked in China, I mean, that's a tough group.
Yeah, and I think a tough group for H2K too. But just running through it one last time, we think SKT is going to be the first place, EDG a close second, H2K pretty definitively in third place, although there is a small potential for an upset there, and Bangkok Titans will be thoroughly cleaned. Alright, so now we're going to discuss the last group, which is going to be Group D, and running through this one, it's going to be LGD, the first seed from China, KT Rolster, the third seed from the LCK from Korea, TSM, who are going to be the second seed from North America, and of course Origin or Orihen, the third seed from Europe.
Okay, let's break into this. I think definitively LGD will be the first seed. I also think that LGD are going to win the tournament. So let's talk about LGD's win conditions and why I think that they are the strongest suited team to win the tournament.
Okay, so before we focus on the tournament, let's just talk about in the group. Number one, I agree completely, but still, I don't want to say that they're going to win the tournament. I'll
be that bold. I'll think that.
Okay, that's fine. But I'm saying I agree with you in the group. I don't agree with the tournament. But run me through LGD.
Okay. First and foremost, you start with Imp. Mm-hmm. I think that, and Jat said this on the broadcast, I think that there is a clear win condition, I guess, or finale that Imp can be the best player in the world. He's already a Triple Crown winner. He has an OGN title. He has an LPL title. He has a World Championship. If he wins 2 World Championships in a row, especially for the caliber of play that he's performing at right now, which if you haven't seen Imp play recently, it is a world class, and I know people say world class all the time. He is playing like a world champion right now. He's playing better than he did at the World Championships. It's beautiful to watch. It's very intelligent. He's an aggressive monster. You don't even need a 2v2. He can 2v1 right now. Majority of bot lanes. It's PYL, Imp are the scariest bot lane in the world. I can definitively say that. In terms of how LGD work and why I think that they are the best suited team to win, they get more chances. And what does that mean? LGD, definitively, I call them a macro-based oriented team. They're very intelligent in terms of their strategy and their map movements, and they're very efficient about how they identify objectives, what is the best objective, and how to prep that objective. Specifically, the prep. So when teams look at prepping for objectives like Dragon or Baron, the first thing is you look at the timer. Okay, 2-minute Dragon window, we need to start prepping for that. What does that mean? Move into the area as a team, sweep out, deny the vision from the enemy team, set down your triangle vision on the objective, so making sure that you have the objective warded as well as deep penetrating objectives into the enemy jungle, so you can see them coming, and then you can either try to make a pick around a choke point, anything like that, but that's typically what teams consider objective preparation. Same thing with kind of like a tower, making sure that you have sideboards for flanking so you can offer a teleport, or you can see where counter ganks are coming in. You can collect as much information as possible to try to make the best.
So you would consider that internationally or just in a general level, that's the standard level of prep? That's the
standard level. LGD take it a step further with their wave preparation. So what I mean by that is when Dragon is coming up, not only do they do all those things, they get on top of the objective, they light it up, they deny the vision, they get deep penetrating vision, but they set up their waves. And they set it up in a point where it's always a slow push. So as you approach a dragon fight, if it's a 50-50 and LGD lose, the enemy team gets the team fight and the dragon. But then they need to reset their map. They don't get the team fight, the dragon, and then, hey, the mid wave is also pushed in so we can take, 2 towers because we have a massive wave doing that. It's like, oh, we have to go back and reset because there's waves on the side or waves in the mid that are pushing in. And we don't get to take anything else.
Okay, so they're so diligent in their wave management that it's impossible to take any kind of greater advantage.
Exactly. Whereas if LGD win, again, 50-50 fight, they get the dragon, they get the team fight, and then, hey, we also get to run into the mid lane or to the bot lane because we have a wave that's pushing or has a mast. And so they get a tower on top of that. So it snowballs much more efficiently. And what this then happens is come late game, if LGD ever lose games, you have to choke them out. It's always a slugfest. They never lose quickly. And again, it goes to their wave management and how they kind of control and play around with creep waves because you're constantly having to stop what you're doing, any of your momentum on the map, reset your position and reset your waves. Make sure that they're pushing against LGD again. So you never kind of get a scenario where, this will never happen against LGD. We're pushing in the bot lane and we just need to stall time because the wave is amassing in the top lane. And if we're just patient enough, someone from LGD will have to respond to the top lane, giving us a 4v5 disadvantage across map, and that's when we'll strike. That just doesn't happen. LGD never put themselves in a position like that. So how that translates into they get more chances is as a game goes on later and later, and we saw this against the EDG versus LGD match in the LPL playoffs when EDG got 3-0'd by LGD. It's this idea that because they have an all-star caliber across their roster, so they're very good at punishing mistakes because you just have these incredible players, pretty much in majority of positions there. It takes longer. You open yourself up because you can stall a game out, that the enemy team will make more mistakes, or they have the probability of making more mistakes. So it gives LGD more chances to punish those mistakes. And that's something that EDG don't have as a team, because their wave management isn't that strong. So if you get ahead, they can't stall out as efficiently. And that's why I think LGD are the best team in the world.
Okay.
It just goes down to that. They can stall out a game. How do they stall out a game? Through their wave manipulation. They're incredibly punishing. They're probably the most punishing team when they do have a lead, because again, that wave manipulation and setting up that they don't just take a single objective that most teams would take in that scenario, but they get multiple objectives, so they can just snowball ahead. Where LGD are weak, because again, if I can point out their strengths, I definitely know where they're weak, it's in the mid game. So LGD, their weakest member on their team is their jungler, TBQ. Just decision-making is kind of an issue. He doesn't really understand the most appropriate time to set up a fight. He can make mechanical issues, especially, like, the fact that he's flanked by Acorn, Godv, Imp, and PYL is just unfortunate for him, because all of those guys are superstars. So in the early game, LGD developed a style where they lane swap, and they're incredibly good at lane swapping, but the reason why they do it is to hide and protect their jungler. Because obviously, if you're in standard lanes, that opens the jungle matchup to a 1v1 where the enemy jungler can run in.
Yeah, and there's a lot more variance in your jungle pathing, but the second you swap and go into a lane swap,
you stay on your stronger side, and so it would be suicide for you to try to invade that jungler and to hurt him, because they'll have more numbers on that side of the map, so it completely denies that. So it's the mid game. Why is it the mid game? Because that's the point where you're going to have that 15 to 20 minute mark. There's going to be a dragon fight there, and that's when TBQ matters. So early game, he doesn't matter because they hide him, and that's whatever. Mid game, it matters because he has to hit that smite. He has to hit that team fight. There hasn't been enough time where LGD have gotten to play with their waves, where they're able to amass kind of their passive lead. Like, you look at Imp, he's always going to have 70 plus CS on the enemy 80 carry, but at that 15 to 20 minute mark, the creep waves just haven't been on the map long enough. He hasn't had the time to do that, so LGD will probably still have a lead or be very close, but it's not that 10 minutes out where it's like, okay, every single lane is winning on CS.
Or the whole of LGD does not have enough of a gold lead to make up for
the fact that
the lack of mechanical skill, or the lack of,
And then late game, the jungler is more just like that one playmaking, so there's not as much pressure there. Like, yes, the smite still matters, but because Imp is now, a full 2 items up on any other AD carry because he's 100 CS up on them, because Godfrey has finally had, like, his core itemization so he can be in, because Acorn is now the team fighting monster, it doesn't matter. So, mid-game, if you want to beat LGD, that's where you hit them. And you get one shot, and you hit them as hard as possible. But I think this is also why, particularly in stylistic matchups, like team fighting teams, so people like Fnatic, people like AHQ, people like Invictus Gaming, EDG, not necessarily so much SKT, because again, I consider SKT more of a skirmish team than a 5v5. Not that they can't 5v5, just that I think their skirmish is so much more potent, but it's like, that's your Mike Tyson moment. You have to hit them really hard. So there's my LGD spiel. That's what I think about that team. That's what I think the win conditions and the loss conditions are for them. And I think definitively in this group, they're number 1.
I don't think there's any argument. And the thing that I want to go into next is that I think KT Rolster are in second place, but I don't really think there's much of a shot for KT to upset LGD. While in a lot of these groups it's been a big question over who's going to be first seed, who's going to be second seed, I think KT are good. KT are, I would say, definitively the second seed in this group, but they just don't hold the candle to me for LGD. KT have looked a lot better since they got Pickaboo. They have improved. That's been a huge element for their team in terms of playmaking, in terms of being a roam support and an initiator. But at the end of the day, I think you're right. I don't know if LGD is going to win the tournament, but I know that they're going to be the first seed for this group.
I'm going to put my money on LGD.
Yeah.
I want CLG. Don't let me down, CLG, but I'm going to put my money on LGD. But I think the better storyline here is actually TSM versus Origin. Not that KT, LGD isn't going to be interesting matchups. I think that this group actually has great matchups, especially in terms of like the history and the legacy of all of these teams and these players. Obviously, Origin's a newer team, but the players obviously Soaz and XPEK, they've been around for so long.
Yeah.
But the TSM versus the XPEK, Soaz, and friends is really cool to me. So in terms of all of the groups that I'm actually most excited to see, it's actually Group D.
Well, and I think the big thing about Group D is that there's no one weak link. There's no, and don't get me wrong, I like Pain Gaming, I like Bangkok Titans, I like Cloud9, but all of these teams in their groups look outclassed by the competition. And so for Origin and TSM, who, yes, LGD does look to outclass them, these are still teams that, when they're playing at their best, can take games off world-class teams. Have shown up in the past in World Tournaments for XPEK, whether it's XPEK, whether it's Soaz, whether it's, like
Bjergsen,
Dyrus, all these. There's so many experience.
I'm trying to remember the IM where they just went off. It wasn't San Jose.
TSM?
Yeah.
The one where they beat World Elite to win?
Yeah.
That was the World Championship in... I don't know.
I can't remember which one it was.
Yeah, but they beat World Elite.
But yeah, it goes back to, like you said, skill ceiling.
Yeah.
And I think it's important...
This is the thing, right? Is that these teams are both so high variance in that sometimes XPEK is a god, sometimes XPEK is mediocre, sometimes Soaz is triple killing people with Gangplank and looking unstoppable, and sometimes he's not. Dyrus, sometimes he gets crushed in lane, sometimes he wins lane. That's rare, but that's happened. Bjergsen can go off. I mean, all these players have shown that they go off. Even Wild Turtle can go off in the right circumstances. So there's so much variance that it's not confidence inspiring for their games against LGD, where if they're anything less than perfect, they'll get crushed instantly, or even against KT. But their games against each other, anybody can come out on top.
I give the edge to Origin. I think that Origin have multiple threats, or more consistent threats in multiple positions, especially with the patch shifting. We've already seen Soaz, especially on the Gangplank, come out really strong.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is that Origin have shown more flexibility. While TSM...
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like the versatility. Like, Origin have more threats in their arsenal of how they actually win the game.
Well, and they know how to play around those threats, too. And the thing for me is that when we saw TSM CLG, you saw Bjergsen consistently trying to pick something he'd carry on, whether it was the Yasuo or the Orianna, right? Like, trying to pick something where he could have a big impact in teamfights, could be a playmaker for the team. And they always put Wild Turtle on Kog'Maw. And that's like a huge late game damage source, and you have to be willing to play around that Kog'Maw. And TSM did not look willing to play around Wild Turtle. They did not look willing to draft around Dyrus. And so TSM, if I look at that team, I'm saying it's a Bjergsen-focused team every time. Is the easiest way for them to win a game. Whereas Origin, yes, XPEK can show up, but so can Soaz. Even Mithy has had some pretty amazing performances. And while Mithy and Niels are still, I would say, overall a younger bot lane than Wild Turtle, Lustboy, given their recent performances from TSM's bot lane, I'm giving the edge in that regard to Origin.
So I think we got LGD, KT, Origin, TSM.
Yeah, and I think that's, I mean, it's a tough break for TSM, and they can still third slot.
They got the most, like, this is the group of death.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not as bad as last year's group of death, but this is definitively the group of death. Every single one of these teams is good. Every single one of these teams, without a doubt, belongs in the World Championship. I would expect to see these teams again next year as well if they keep up this level of performance. But this year, the draw did not favor Origin or TSM, and this is a pretty rough group for them. So unfortunately, yeah, I agree. I mean, despite what NA fans might think, I think TSM are going to be the fourth spot here.
Yep.
All right. That's going to do it for this video for us, guys. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked the video, be sure to subscribe or follow us on Twitter. We'll have those links below for you. And look forward for our channel for more content. We're basically just going to spam you until Worlds is over and we have to go back to our normal jobs.